Okay, welcome everyone. We'll get started in a few minutes. We'll just give folks a few more moments to join. While we're waiting, if you want to introduce yourself to other attendees in the chat box, you're welcome to use that. It should be unlocked now. Okay, I think we'll just go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be going through our applicant workshop for the Green Infrastructure Grant Program and introducing the Spring 24 application cycle. We'll do some intros first. So my name is Will Logsdon. I'm a watershed planner at the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, and I help administer the grant program, and I work on a variety of green infrastructure and stormwater management projects in San Francisco. And I'll pass it over to my colleague, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Sarah Bloom, Senior Watershed Planner with the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, also working with Will on a variety of different green infrastructure projects and programs. I will pass it to Kristen.
Hi, I'm Kristen Matsumura. I'm a civil engineer and I do some of the technical support for this program. I'll be answering the Q&A. I'll be keeping an eye on the Q&A and answer what I can.
Great. So yeah, today, we'll be recording this webinar and posting it to our website. If you have questions along the way, like Kristen said, please feel free to use the Q&A box, not the chat box. And then you're also welcome to raise your virtual hand at the end of the webinar, and we can answer questions as they come up. And yeah, feel free to use the chat box to introduce yourself with your name and organization. Based on the folks who registered for the webinar for today, we have a mix of community members, property owners or property owner representatives, and then a few contractors who are interested in working with property owners on potential projects, and then a group of others. And then as far as where folks are at with their projects, we're pretty split evenly between people who have a potential project location in mind and those who don't yet have a project location. So hopefully the property assessment section of this webinar will be a helpful introduction into both looking at properties for potential opportunities and evaluating existing properties that you already have your eye on. Our goals for today, one is to just understand the benefits of green infrastructure. And like I said, learn a little bit about assessing properties for green infrastructure. And we'll also be providing some more information on additional resources that SFPUC offers, including our technical assistance program. And of course, we'll answer any questions that you have on the grant program. And then hopefully this is an opportunity to meet some other folks who are interested into the program and in these projects and build some community around our grant projects. So I'll go through an introduction to what is green infrastructure and how does it work, an overview of the grant program, and then a property assessment section that will include a tutorial of our program web map that has some helpful resources on it. And then we'll have some FAQs, next steps, and questions at the end. Okay, so to begin with just an overview of what is green infrastructure and why is SFPUC interested in it. Firstly, in San Francisco, we have a combined sewer system, which means that all of the wastewater that is flushed down the toilet or goes down the sink or the shower is combined in the same network of pipes as all of the stormwater that flows off of the street or off of your roof when it rains. And so that has really significant benefits for water quality. We're able to treat most of that water at one of our wastewater treatment facilities before discharging it to the ocean or to the bay. But as we've seen, especially in recent years, our sewer system is only designed to carry so much flow. And during really heavy rain events, it can be overwhelmed, which can lead to localized flooding or combined sewer discharges to the ocean or to the bay. And so with climate change, it's a really big priority for us to do what we can to reduce the burden on our sewer system. And one way that we can do that is to capture water before it reaches our sewer system. And that's where green infrastructure really comes into play. Green infrastructure is a set of tools for managing stormwater, capturing it, slowing it down, filtering, cleaning it, to keep it away from our sewer system and prevent the sewer system from being overwhelmed during those large rain events. There are many different ways that we can go about doing that in an urban environment. In some cases, we can use landscape solutions or vegetated green infrastructure like rain gardens or bioretention planters that are shown in this section in the streetscape. There are also non-vegetative solutions like permeable pavement that can be used that allows water to infiltrate through the pavement and into the soil. And then there are also other types, including like rainwater harvesting cisterns that capture rainwater and then provide an alternate water source that can be used for irrigation or for toilet flushing. All of these different types of green infrastructure work in sort of the same way, and we wanted to introduce this concept of the drainage management area because this is one of the ways that we measure performance through the grant program and is how we dictate the amount of available funding for a project. So the drainage management area is the area of a property that would, when it rains, contribute stormwater to the green infrastructure facility. So in this case, the drainage management area is this blue dashed outline, including the tennis courts and basketball court. And when it would rain, all of this water from these courts would flow into a rain garden located on like the bottom of the screen here. And so that drainage management area is just a key kind of aspect of how we design green infrastructure. We will size the facility, the rain garden or the rainwater harvesting cistern, so that it can capture a certain amount of water over that drainage area. And so that's just kind of an example of what that sort of ratio of the planter size to the drainage area looks like. And so we'll be circling back to this kind of concept later, but I just wanted to introduce that. And then I also want to introduce this slide about the stormwater charge. So San Francisco, your sewer bill includes both the costs of managing wastewater, sanitary flow, and the stormwater flow. Like I mentioned, our sewer system, because it is combined, we capture and treat both of those types of flows. And previously, those were kind of mixed into just one sewer surface charge. And as of July of last year, we separated out that charge to bill our customers for stormwater and then separately bill them for wastewater sanitary flow. And so with that, there's an opportunity now to reduce the stormwater portion of your bill and which is based on the size of the property and impermeable and permeable surfaces on the property. So customers who have installed green infrastructure, completed a green infrastructure grant project, are now eligible for bill credits, which is a monthly reduction in that stormwater portion of your bill. And so that's a new program that's launched over the last year. So that's a little background on just kind of stormwater and green infrastructure in San Francisco. And so now I'll give some more information on the grant program specifically. I also want to just mention that this is one of many programs that San Francisco Public Utilities offers. We're kind of marketing these programs with under this Transform the Storm umbrella, which is a citywide effort to protect our surrounding waters and help San Francisco adapt to climate change while beautifying our neighborhoods with sustainable stormwater management practices. And so Green Infrastructure Grant is one of several programs. If by the end of this webinar you find that maybe this program isn't the best fit for you or your community or a project that you have in mind, I definitely encourage you to explore some of these other programs at our website at sfpuc.org. So the Green Infrastructure Grant is intended for sort of large, highly impervious properties in San Francisco, and we provide funding to design, build, and green infrastructure projects. And there's some more details to this that I'll go through in some of the eligibility criteria. But basically, our grant program can pay for the design and construction of the project, and through this program, the property owner would sign on to a maintenance agreement and would agree to maintain the project after it's constructed. And on the right there, we have an example of one of our previous grantees at Bessie Carmichael Middle School. The program has 5 minimum eligibility criteria that must be met and demonstrated through your application. The first is just being located in San Francisco and being connected to an SFPUC owned and operated sewer system. The second is size. So I mentioned this is a program for kind of large, highly impervious parcels. So this is where that kind of drainage area concept starts to come into play. So we have a minimum size of capturing stormwater from at least half an acre of impervious surface. So that drainage management area of your project has to be at least half an acre. We also have an experience requirements. You have to have on your grant team someone with experience designing or constructing green infrastructure. So that could be a landscape architect or an engineer. And then also to be in good standing with currently active grant projects. So if you have another grant that we've awarded you, just demonstrating that you're continuing to be on schedule and submitting deliverables for that project. Fourth, we have a co-benefit requirement for this program. So in addition to capturing stormwater and the benefits that provides to our sewer system, we also want to promote projects that are providing multiple benefits on top of that. And so there's a requirement that your project demonstrate that it provides at least 2 additional co-benefits, and those are listed in our guidebook and in the applications and solicitation. And so there's some things in there that are related to providing educational benefits, recreational or public access opportunities, water reuse, climate resilience. There's several options to choose from, and each has its own definition. And we'll provide some more examples of that later in the presentation. And then lastly, there's a stormwater performance requirement that is related to the amount of water we expect the project to collect, and is related to the sizing of the green infrastructure. And so we have a design storm that we want to make sure that we capture the 0.75 inch depth storm when it rains over that drainage area. So just ensuring that your facilities are sized correctly to provide that benefit to the sewer system. So I mentioned that the property owner would be the one responsible for maintenance over time. And so this grant program has a 20-year maintenance requirement. And so in signing the grant agreement, the property owner, agrees to continue that maintenance for the duration of the 20-year agreement. And there's also a declaration of deed restrictions that is recorded against the property. We have annual reporting requirements. Usually in the fall, we ask that grantees submit kind of a checklist that describes how the project is looking and what kind of maintenance requirements there may be, or just the status of the facilities. And the grant agreement, we'll get into this a little bit later too, but there are some options for having a partnership between a property owner and who would be the grantee, or a third party. And so in this case, both the grantee and the property owner would sign on to the grant agreement, and the property owner would be responsible for maintenance, while the grantee with the third party would be responsible for kind of delivering the project in partnership with the property owner. So this spring we'll have an application cycle with applications due June 3rd. Our sort of evaluation of the applications involves firstly just confirming that the projects meet the 5 minimum eligibility criteria that I described, and then we'll have a scoring rubric in our application requirements that's posted on our website, and Sarah will give some examples of some of the specific scoring within that rubric. And so that really describes how we delegate the points for our application review. And we anticipate announcing awards in end of July of this year. So we've, that's kind of a brief overview of the program, and just to give a little more background on kind of like where we are in this program, what we've done to date. So want to give a thank you to all of you for for your interest in the program, and in some cases participation in the program. We've been running for 5 years now. We launched in 2019, and since then we've awarded 22 projects. We've evaluated over 60 projects, or over 60 properties in San Francisco. 17 of the awarded projects are schools and educational facilities that have a combined student population that we will reach of over 6,000 students in San Francisco. 3 public parks have been awarded grants, and we have a growing number of additional institutional and residential properties that are also have been awarded. And we're growing our partnerships with the San Francisco School District, Rec and Park, other nonprofits and community-based organizations in San Francisco. And this is a kind of a preview of our web map that I'll give some more background on here shortly, but that shows the sort of distribution of where the projects are located in San Francisco. And then to give a couple examples of those, just to kind of give you an idea of sort of what could be possible through this grant program. The project that we completed at Lycée Francais San Francisco in 2022 involved a series of kind of swales around the exterior of the building with new landscaping. They also installed permeable pavement and a cistern that the students use for watering some gardens in the interior courtyard of the school. And so yeah, this project was able to kind of deliver on several different types of green infrastructure and incorporate educational benefits with some of their science curriculum at the school. Lafayette Elementary School is another grantee that completed construction in 2020. This one was paired with a bond-funded SFUSD project at the school, and so there was some additional outside funding for this project. And this one included a series of what we call dry creek beds that are that serve as both sort of nature play spaces for students that also capture and retain stormwater on the site. And here's some other photos of how that project looked like after construction at Lafayette Elementary. And then most recently we had a project complete a construction at St. Anne of the Sunset. They installed a really whole new parking lot with full permeable pavement shown on the left there. And in the schoolyard, they planted several, multiple trees in new rain garden basins and in some additional permeable pavement in the schoolyard. So really focusing on greening their schoolyard that was before the project a really large expanse of asphalt. And this project was also highlighted recently in a CBS News article, which we'll have a link to on the slides when we post these. And the article focuses on kind of the experience of the school going through the grant program, and then also what San Francisco is kind of doing to adapt to climate change. Okay, so that's an introduction into our program, green infrastructure. And so now to kind of start to think about, given what you know about the program, you might have a site in mind, or your next step might be to evaluate some different potential locations for a project. And so we wanted to kind of give some resources into how to go about like a very high level initial pass of a property to explore whether or not there could be green infrastructure opportunities on the site. So this is just kind of like a first pass, and there are many different things that would contribute to, a successful project and whether or not green infrastructure is the right fit for your site. So there's a lot of things to consider as far as like coordinating with the property owner and the people who use the site, and what might be their long-term plans for the site. But from a just sort of like physical and environmental perspective, we'll just give kind of an overview of some of the things we might look for initially to evaluate a property. So firstly, identifying the property and confirming that it's eligible for the grant program is kind of the first step. So I mentioned there's that half-acre minimum requirement to meet in order to be eligible for the grant. We recently added a new layer to our grant program map, which allows you to turn on a map of properties in San Francisco that have at least a half an acre of impervious area. I also just want to note that like this map isn't going to be perfect, and so there might be there are definitely additional properties that are not included in these green areas that could also be eligible for the grant. And then there are some that just because you have a half an acre of impervious area, it doesn't mean that necessarily is going to be feasible to capture all of that area on your parcel with green infrastructure. So it's an initial kind of piece of information, but that doesn't necessarily determine your eligibility. Some additional investigation will be required, but it's a good kind of first data point. And then property location is the other piece of this. So just confirming that your property is located in an area that connects to the SFPUC sewer system. And really the only areas that don't connect to our sewer system are shown in the black areas on our program map. And so these are areas that drain directly to the ocean or to the bay without connecting to our sewer system, or in some cases lakes that drain internally and don't connect to our sewer. So once you've kind of confirmed that you have at least an eligible property, the next step is to take a closer look at some of the impervious areas on your parcel. So like I mentioned, just if you only have a half an acre total impervious area on the parcel, it might be challenging to be able to capture all of that area. So using our measurement tool on the program map, you can start to measure some different large impervious surfaces on your parcel that could be like a roof area. In this case, on the bottom right, like measuring the basketball court and tennis courts, so there's one contiguous area, kind of starting to add these areas up to see if you would reach half an acre. And ideally, you would have some wiggle room there, because inevitably, as we evaluate things further on a site, we usually find that certain areas are just not going to be feasible for one reason or another. Maybe the grading, maybe the roof drains internally and there's no way to access that downspout. And so having more than half an acre to begin with is helpful, so that you have some room for flexibility as we evaluate these spaces. And then kind of thinking about, this is a good time to start to think about, well, what would I do with the water if I were able to capture it while it's running off this surface? And so if your goals are really to like, let's say you want a source of stormwater that you can use for watering your garden or something like that, that would mean you would need a roof area to be able to capture that water, because a cistern to capture that water would need to be above ground and connect to a downspout from the building. So if you don't have a lot of roof area, you're limited to, more of the at-grade surfaces that might be more suitable for something like permeable pavement or a rain garden. On the flip side, if your parcel is all building and you don't really have a lot of at-grade area, then maybe rainwater harvesting is the only, real option on that parcel. So kind of starting to think about, what types of solutions might be applicable for the different drainage areas on the property. And then once you have kind of an idea of, okay, I have a property that's eligible, I have some large impervious areas, the next step is to kind of start to think about some of the other environmental factors and social factors that might influence the project. So one like bucket of projects that we have in our program are those that infiltrate stormwater into the ground. In that case, there are some constraints to doing that in some areas of San Francisco, and some of the things that inform whether or not we can take stormwater and allow it to infiltrate include the soil type, the slope and topography of a property, and then Maher areas is another factor. So those are areas in San Francisco that may have legacy industrial land use or potential soil or groundwater contamination, and that can cause infiltrating stormwater in those areas might be prohibited or could cause problems. And so some of these things can kind of inform whether or not infiltration is possible. If it's not possible, that doesn't mean that that green infrastructure isn't feasible for your site. It just means that we might explore other options like rainwater harvesting, for example. And then, in addition to some of these kind of physical aspects of the property, it's good to think about some of the other co-benefit opportunities. Some of those are kind of based on maps and spatial information. And so whether or not your property is located in an environmental justice area, we can determine that from our program web map. There are also some different factors related to climate resilience. So San Francisco Department of Public Health has published a map about areas of San Francisco that are particularly vulnerable to heat, and we've included that in our map. So projects located in those high priority heat resilience areas, if you were to prioritize increasing tree canopy on your site, that would be a good way to achieve the co-benefit on climate resilience. And Sarah will give some more examples of some of these different co-benefits and how they're scored in the application. They all, like I said, they all have their own kind of definition and scoring criteria, which is outlined in the application requirements. So it's definitely important to, in addition to looking at the web map, seeing how those are actually scored on the application will be important as you continue to develop your application. And so once you've done this kind of initial pass of your property, where it's located, some potential drainage areas, then the next step, if you think that this, based on what you've learned so far, if it seems like there's some opportunities there, and you at this point you probably have questions for SFPUC, so this is a good time to reach out to us. We can either schedule a consultation call or a site visit to come out to your property and do a more detailed assessment, and that will usually result in a green infrastructure opportunities assessment, where we'll provide a high-level summary based on what we saw on the site, some of the types of green infrastructure that might be feasible, some examples of where that's been done, in some photographs of similar projects, and then a high-level map of your site's drainage management areas. We also have a GI vendor list on our website that has a list of contractors and other folks who are interested in working on projects through this program, and some of those vendors might also provide you with technical assistance for your application. This is just kind of a summary of some of the things we might look for after we go out and do a site visit and really zoom in to do a deep dive into some of the opportunities and constraints. And so after you've kind of looked at this at a high level, arts staff would look at it at a more granular level, and really kind of like assessing what could be feasible on different areas of your property. And so before I pass it over to Sarah to go through the FAQ and next steps, I wanted to just give a quick introduction to the program web map that's linked on our website. So this has, you know, several of the resources that I talked about, and so just to get kind of orient you and show you some different ways to use this map. Here's what this looks like. So on the a second here. On the right side of the screen, you should have a list of layers, and that can be turned on and off. And then
Well, we're
there's,
still seeing the PowerPoint.
oh, I'm sorry. Give me one sec. Let me reshare my screens. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so with the program web map on, there's a link to it on our website. On the right side of your screen, you should have a list of layers, which can be turned on and off with this button up here. There's also a legend that can be turned, that will show for the layers that are turned on, you know, defining what those areas are. And so yeah, let's just look at kind of an example here, maybe using one of our previous awarded projects. So one of the things to check is this, you know, ineligible areas. And let's say I was interested in this school, which is Lycée Francais, one of our grantees. It's clear they're not in an ineligible area. They connect to our sewer system. I can scroll down to the bottom and I can turn on the large parcels layer that will show parcels in San Francisco with at least half an acre of impervious area, and they show up on this list. You can click on that, and that layer will show you the total property size, the area of impervious surfaces, and the area of permeable surfaces, and it will also show you the area of the property that's not eligible for a grant. So like if a portion of the property was in that ineligible area. So in this case, we have 0.83 acres. So over the threshold of half an acre and with some room to play with, which is a good sign. And then from there, I might use the measure tool, which is up in the right-hand corner here. So we can turn that on. And there's an option for area, which can be set to acres or to square feet. And let's just see. So I can see that they have a schoolyard with a basketball court and maybe some additional area over here. And so I could take a quick measurement of this area and see, you know, roughly how much space that is. And it will show me on the right side here, 0.17 acres. And so you can kind of start to piece together some different drainage areas and see, you know, how you might go about getting up to that half acre minimum. And then with some of the other, you know, some of the other features here, I might look at the soil type to see, you know, if I'm interested in infiltrating stormwater on this site, what type of soil would we encounter here? There are 4 different types, basically ranging from very sandy soil as type A to more clayey soil under type D. Most of the Sunset is very sandy soil. And if you click on this portion of the web map, it will give you some more information on each of those soil types and what that means. So I have very sandy soil, which is a good sign. I can turn on this Maher ordinance areas, which shows areas in San Francisco that might have had some legacy contamination. It looks like there are something nearby, but it doesn't cover the site, so that is a good sign. I know from the site that this is a gas station, and so those are kind of things to consider that may make infiltrating stormwater infeasible. And then some of the other, more social factors related to the co-benefits that you could look at would be the environmental justice communities, which is a map produced by San Francisco Planning Department. And again, with this map, if you click on some of the features, it will tell you the level of the sort of environmental burden of different areas of San Francisco. In this case, we're in the Sunset next to 19th Avenue, so there's maybe some air quality issues in this area, but in general, not a really high priority environmental justice area compared to the southeast area of San Francisco. We can look at heat resilience. So actually, based on some of the social factors and physical factors of this area, this is a part of SFDPH's extreme heat vulnerability map. More information can be found there. And then there's also a similar map for flood resilience. So these are areas in San Francisco that when we have these really heavy storm events, the more we can capture stormwater in these particular areas, the greater the benefit to our sewer network in some of the more vulnerable areas of the city for flooding. So capturing additional stormwater during those big storms is a high priority in these areas shown in blue here. So yeah, I just encourage you to kind of take a look at this as a resource, and I'll pass it over to Sarah now to go through some additional FAQs before we open it up for questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Will.
And I will share my screen again.
Yeah, so I'll just go over a couple of FAQs and kind of important information as you guys get started after this webinar on kind of the next phase of assessing your project and maybe getting started on your application. And we'll talk a little bit about next steps. So just some of the basics, right? Who can apply? There's a lot of different types of folks and entities that can apply to our program. So it's not kind of a one size fits all, but our eligible grantees can be, the property owners themselves. If it's the property owner that wants to apply for the funding from the city, they can be government agencies, nonprofits, individuals, or for-profit entities. It's just important to know, though, that because our grant agreement is 20 years in length and has an operations and maintenance requirement, that if the grantee is not the property owner, so if you're, applying kind of as a team, right, both the grantee and the property owner have to sign the grant agreement, and that property owner at the time of application will need to provide a letter of support. And that letter of support should say, I'm aware of the project, I support this project, I've read what the requirements are, right? I've been involved as part of submitting this application, and that, if we're awarded, we agree to maintain the property. So we want to make sure that if you're an entity or grantee that is partnering with a property owner to submit an application, that you have really engaged that property owner and that, they understand what their requirements are as part of this project going forward. Also, whoever is applying as the grantee will be required to be a city vendor in order to receive those grant funds from the city. That can be a pretty lengthy process if you are not already registered as a city vendor. So make sure you become familiar with what those requirements are. The last thing we want to see is somebody who gets awarded a project and then they can't qualify to be a city vendor. So definitely take a look at that information online. If you're not sure where to find it, you can send us an email to gigrants@sfwater.org and we can give you some more resources on that. So timeline and funding, the important stuff. So how much money can you receive as part of this project? So remember when Will went over those eligibility criteria, we have a minimum size of that 1/2 acre of impervious surface. So the funding through this program is tied to how much stormwater you can manage and how much impervious acreage you can manage. So the grant awards for this project are $930,000 per impervious acre that is managed, up to $2 million a project. So a maximum grant of $2 million, but you will not be eligible for that $2 million unless you're proposing to manage, I'm bad at math, 2-point-something acres, right? If that makes sense. So if you submit a grant application and you're saying, I can manage a full acre of, impervious surface here, then you would be eligible for a maximum grant amount of $930,000. If that makes sense. Also note that grants are taxable income, and so depending on your tax responsibility as a grantee, you may have to report the grant as taxable income. I just want to let folks know that ahead of time. And then how much time do you have to complete your project? So this is important that, for every cycle that timeline changes, but basically you have about 2 years from when you execute your grant agreement with us. So you'll apply, you'll be awarded, then you'll execute a grant agreement, and you'll have 2 years from that time in order to deliver the project or start construction. So for applications coming in on our spring 2024 cycle, we will expect you to start construction by December 2026. So this is an annual program. We have 2 cycles a year. We've been doing that now pretty consistently for the last 2 or 3 years. And so when you think about this timeline requirement, right, there's a schedule tab in the application where we expect you to show us your plan for getting to construction by December 2026. If you feel like, hey, maybe we can't make that timeline as part of this cycle, or we just feel like we're not ready, that's an excellent time to say, hey, maybe we won't apply in the spring of 2024, but we'll apply in the fall of 2024 when we have a bit more ideas around when we think we can deliver this project. So this is not kind of a one-time chance to apply for funding. So we really want to support our grantees in applying for funding when they're ready to move that project forward, right? Because once you start and you receive the grant funds, you are you're beholden to the schedule that you provide us, right? And we need to see progress on the design and the implementation of the project. So what can the grant pay for? Our funds can go to the design and construction of green infrastructure, stormwater elements only. So a lot of times projects leverage funding from other sources, right? Maybe there's bond funding from a public entity, or maybe you've raised philanthropy dollars or fundraised in the community for your project. So our funding can only go towards things that support the stormwater function of the project. And luckily with green infrastructure, right, those things all have co-benefits. So we can pay for things like plants and soil and things like that as long as they're a part of the stormwater management function of the property or function of the project, excuse me. You're allowed to use up to 30% of your total grant award to support the planning and design of the project itself. So you need to pay for an engineer, a landscape architect, somebody to administer your project, or survey or geotech, all of the technical services that are required in order to design a green infrastructure project. You have up to 30% of the total project budget to pay for that. And then the remaining funds go towards the direct construction costs for the green infrastructure features and other requirements as part of the project. So if you selected education and curriculum co-benefit, and you show in your plan, I have 3 locations for signage about how watershed works, right? The project can pay for that because it's part of the stormwater function of the project. So that's a good example of kind of the direct features for the green infrastructure themselves, and then also the other project requirements. Things that we can't pay for under any circumstances, right, is maintenance is not included as part of this project. That's supposed to be the responsibility of the property owner and other project proponents, however you guys want to decide to do that over time. So we can't see a line item in there to support an annual maintenance cost. And we also can't pay for anything that's non-green infrastructure related. So say you're doing work on a property and you're going to use the grant project that you have as a way to update some other items in your property that need to be updated, like lighting, or maybe you want to change out a piece of play equipment, or install a new basketball standard, something like that. That cannot be paid for as part of the grant funds and needs to be paid for with matching or other dollars. We also currently can't fund artificial turf fields. So if you're considering that, piece of the artificial turf field has to be an external source of funding, but we can pay for the subsurface stormwater facility below that, if that's something you're interested in. And we also can't pay for any ongoing monitoring or research, so just design and construction costs for the facilities themselves. And we get this question a lot. So are projects in the public right-of-way eligible? So currently, right now, projects that are located entirely within the public right-of-way are not eligible for funding through this program, right? We have a 20-year maintenance requirement and a deed restriction that is recorded against the property. And so if we have a project that's in the public right-of-way, we currently don't have a mechanism to record that deed restriction, right? But it is something that we're looking into, and it's something that our program is looking to expand to in the future. So we'll have more information for you all on whether public right-of-way projects are eligible in our fall 2024 cycle. So stay tuned for that. But right now, the way the program is currently structured, the green infrastructure facility itself has to be located on a parcel. So you can see an example here where we have the green infrastructure facility located on a piece of park property, but it's managing runoff from a nearby road. So you can integrate your project with some public right-of-way runoff in order to meet that minimum half-acre requirement, but the parcel and the facility, or the facility itself, needs to be located on a parcel currently. And just to note that if you are looking at a project that takes public water from the street and maybe drains it to a parcel in order to meet that half-acre requirement, the project will have to be coordinated with the local agencies, either that own the land or Public Works, who has the jurisdiction in the public right-of-way, and you'll need to get all of the necessary permits to do work in the public right-of-way. So some of our key program materials as you get started, the three most important ones are up on our website, sfpuc.org/GI grants, are our program guidebook, the spring application requirements, and our application itself, which is an Excel document. I've grayed out the application itself because this is actually the last document that you should look at. Be sure you take a look at our program guidebook and the solicitation requirements first. Program guidebook will give you a really good overview of all of the requirements of the program, from application through operations and maintenance. So especially if you're working with a property owner or you're a property owner yourself, make sure you familiarize yourself with the whole length of the program requirements. The design and delivery of the project is just one piece of the overall life cycle of the project itself. And then before you get started on your application, make sure you read the spring application requirements, because that will tell you exactly how to fill out your application and how your application itself will be scored. So if we go to the next slide, this is just a quick summary of how the applications are going to be evaluated. Each application is worth 100 points and is distributed between 4 categories, which is stormwater management, co-benefits, the proposed concept design and budget that you're applying with, and your project implementation plan. So I'm going to take a second to share my screen so we can go over this solicitation document together. All right. Everybody see that? Our website. If you scroll down under resources, this is also where our grant program map is. Folks are asking that in the chat. Everything is listed under these resources. You'll go to our, spring 2024 solicitation document, and everything is located in here. So quick intro, the eligibility requirements that Will went over before, application instructions. So it's really important that you guys read through this document in detail, because some of these small details in here can be the difference between submitting a successful application and not. So things like making sure your email doesn't get a bounce back, right? We have an application deadline. So if you're waiting towards the end of the day, towards the last possible chance to submit applications, as most of us do with deadlines, right? And your email gets a bounce back, and we don't know that that happened till after the application deadline, we cannot accept your application. So making sure that you guys really understand that what those requirements are so that things get submitted correctly. A complete application checklist for you guys is in here. One of the first things we do when the application comes in is we screen it for completeness. We cannot review and score incomplete applications. So if you submit something to us that's incomplete, we have to kick it back. We can't even advance you to kind of the scoring round of the application. So it's important that you guys go through and make sure that every section of the application is complete. Here's that screening criteria for you that you can take a look at as well. And then once we get down into the scoring application or scoring section, each of these categories explains to you how we're going to evaluate and assign points to your project, right? So really in the co-benefit section, that's a big one. You have the minimum, right, which is 2 co-benefits that you have to say your project can include, but you get a total of 25 points in this section. And just because you click a box that says, oh, I'm doing, education co-benefit, that doesn't mean you're going to get full points for that co-benefit. So it's really important that you guys read through all of these requirements. So let's just take a look at one together, right? Education and watershed stewardship. It explains to you how projects will be evaluated, a total of 3 points. So if you want 3 points for that, the full points for that co-benefit when you click it, you really need to understand exactly what we're going to be looking for. And we lay that out for you in the co-benefit requirement, right? We tell you exactly what needs to be included for you to get all of the points available in that co-benefit category. So when you're filling these out in a narrative form in your application, you might think, oh, I put on my concept design signage right there, right? So I'll get full credit for this education co-benefit. Answer to that is no, right? We need to see it written out in that section of the application. You need to assume that, we don't know anything extra about your project, and that anything we need to know about what you're planning to do for education and stewardship, how many signs you have, what the content of those signs are going to be, all of those things need to be written in the co-benefit section of the application for you to get full points. And what will happen is that will help determine the ranking of your application between other projects that come in. So even if you're meeting the minimum requirements, how many points you get in the scoring is what will determine your ranking. And so then we can go down a little bit more for things like the concept design, right? 20 points, that's a huge amount of your score in your application. And so we put in here exactly, what needs to be included in a concept design in order for us to give you a full 20 points for your concept design. So commonly what we see is important pieces of information missing from the concept design that require us to kind of dock points. You may have a feasible stormwater management concept. We may be able to see what you're proposing to do, but maybe you forgot to put existing utilities on there, or you didn't take the time to put a north arrow, right? All of those things will be things that we have to dock points off of your application. So if you're really looking to maximize the points available, make sure you read through what that evaluation criteria is and making sure you're including all of that important fundamental information so that we can give you the full points in that section. All right. So that is it on the application solicitation. Yeah, so then at this point, next steps is if you have any questions or you want resources or additional information, everything is going to be up available on our website. We have that running list of resources that has everything you need in order to do an application. If you have questions or you want to schedule an opportunities assessment after listening to the webinar today, you're like, hey, my property I think is a good fit. I want to do an opportunities assessment. Go ahead and give us send us an email at gigrants@sfwater.org and we'll get you guys on the schedule for that. And that applications are due June 3rd. So yeah, we're excited and want to thank you all for your time and attendance today, listening to our webinar. And we have just a couple minutes for Q&A, so we can pause for that. And if folks want to stay on a little later, I know our panelists are able to stay on a couple minutes past 1 o'clock, so we can keep going if there are other questions to be answered. I think we usually do raise the virtual hand
Yeah,
question?
you should be able to use that raise virtual hand option if you have a question for us, and we're happy to address it.
And a reminder that this webinar will be posted to our website in the next couple of days. So don't worry if you want to go back and revisit information and you have questions later, you can always email us then as well. like we did have some questions in the Q&A, so that's great.
There's a question there about any benefit to submitting an early application, or are the applications assessed after the deadline? Yeah, they're assessed after the deadline, after we've received all applications. So I would definitely encourage you to complete your application early and not wait, like Sarah said, till that deadline. But we won't score it until we receive all the applications.
The benefit of submitting early, though, is if something does go wrong, you will have time to fix it. So say you do submit an application and it gets a bounce back, right? And we never get it. And you're like, oh, I'm supposed to get an email confirmation, because we will always send you an email confirmation after we receive your application. And maybe you send us an email, hey, I sent in an application, did you receive it? And we're like, no, we didn't. And so then you have time to troubleshoot that, because you're a few days ahead of time and you're not, an hour before midnight on the application deadline. So there's definitely a benefit to submitting early, just to make sure your application got in and that it's complete, and you get that confirmation from us, even though we won't score it until after the application deadline.
Looks like Dad had a question about how early in the process could we check in with the grants team to ask detailed questions or request a site visit. Yeah, it's never too early, really. This is a good time if you're thinking about the spring application cycle. Even if you're thinking about later down the line applying for the fall cycle, this is also a good time. We can still do an evaluation and continue to kind of develop that application over the summer and make sure you're ready for the fall. So and really year round we're doing site visits and property evaluations, and so it kind of just depends on sort of which cycle we might target. I think as we start to get into once we're in the month of May, I would say that if you were just starting to evaluate a site at that stage, it's probably a little late to get an application in for this grant cycle for the June 3rd deadline. And so we might encourage you to think more about the fall cycle. And so really the earlier the better. Yeah, not seeing any other questions or hands raised. So yeah, again, thank you everyone for joining us today. And yeah, like Sarah said, we'll post this information on our website. You can also find a link to the program map on our website. It might be a little, if you might have to scroll down a little bit to the link in the resources section to access that program map, just in case you're having a little bit of trouble finding that. But there are plenty of other resources up on our website too. And yeah, feel free to reach out to us if we can answer any questions or schedule a site visit.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.